Tonight's story is a long, wandering journey through the Middle Ages, through fields and forests, through taverns filled with smoke and laughter, and through quiet rooms lit only by the soft glow of a candle. It is a gentle exploration of how people lived, what they feared, how they found comfort, and, of course, the strange and sometimes surprising ways they altered their state of mind. This is not a fast story or an intense one. It is slow, warm, and steady, meant to ease you into rest, to quiet your thoughts, and to give your imagination something peaceful to drift upon. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and let the world of the Middle Ages unfold around you. Thank you for being here, and for giving your time to this quiet journey. Chapter 1. Life in the Middle Ages. Imagine the day beginning long before sunrise. The sky is still dark, and the only sound is the soft crackle of a fire being stirred awake in a wooden hearth. In a small village of crooked houses and uneven paths, people begin to rise slowly from their straw-filled beds. The air is cold, seeping through thin walls and worn clothing, and a faint mist rests above the ground, waiting for the sun to lift it. Life in the Middle Ages moved at a pace dictated entirely by nature. There were no clocks ringing, no engines humming, no lights glowing through the night. People lived with the rhythm of daylight and darkness. When the sun rose, so did the world. When it set, life softened into stillness. Villagers stepped outside into the pale morning, pulling their cloaks tighter around themselves. Smoke drifted from chimneys. Chickens scratched at the frozen dirt. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Nothing hurried. Everything was modest, steady, and predictable. Most people worked from the moment they woke until the moment the sun disappeared again. Fields needed tending, fires needed feeding, animals needed caring, and food needed preparing. There was always something that required attention. Life was physical, demanding, and repetitive, and yet there was a certain calmness in that repetition, a kind of quiet acceptance of the world as it was. For many, the struggle of daily life felt so normal that they barely wondered what life could be like beyond it. Survival was enough, and routine was comforting. It kept the mind from wandering too far into the unknown. As the day grew brighter, the village began to fill with sound, the chatter of neighbors trading gossip, the creak of wooden carts rolling along worn paths, the distant ring of metal from a blacksmith's hammer. Yet even with these sounds, the world still felt gentle, almost muted, as though wrapped in a soft blanket of fog and frost. This was the setting in which medieval people lived, worked, and dreamed, and in which they sought moments of escape, relief, or transformation. Their world was shaped by simplicity, hardship, and necessity, but also by community, faith, and imagination. And in this quiet world, where the nights were long and the days were filled with labor, people found many different ways to shift their minds away from the weight of their existence. Some were accidental, some were intentional, some were spiritual, and some were simply the result of living in a time when science had not yet explained the mysteries of the human mind. But before we explore those moments of altered perception, let us walk a little further into their world, one step at a time, slowly and gently. Chapter 2. Alcohol, the everyday escape of medieval life. As we settle deeper into medieval life, imagine the morning slowly giving way to the gentle stirrings of the day. The sun climbs a little higher, the frost loosens its grip, and the village begins to warm with the rhythm of human activity. And it is here, in the heart of the community, that one of the most constant companions of medieval people lives and breathes: alcohol. Alcohol was not a luxury in the Middle Ages. It was not reserved for celebrations or late-night gatherings. It was woven directly into the fabric of daily life. In fact, it was so common, so ordinary, that most people hardly thought of it as anything unusual at all. Water, in many places, was unreliable and often unsafe, so people turned naturally to ale, mild, nourishing, and believed to be clean. Children drank it. Adults drank it. Workers drank it through the day to stay warm, to stay hydrated, or simply to take the edge off the constant fatigue of physical labor. This ale was not the strong drink we know today. It was gentle, almost soft in its effect, offering a steady warmth rather than anything overwhelming. People sipped it as part of meals, as part of work breaks, and as part of their household routines. It flowed easily across wooden tables, passed from hand to hand without ceremony. But the mood around alcohol changed when the day turned toward evening. As the sun lowered and the shadows lengthened across the village, the alehouses, simple wooden taverns glowing with firelight, began to fill with life. Step inside one in your imagination. Feel the warmth from the hearth wrapping itself around your shoulders after a cold day. Hear the hum of voices, laughter rising and falling like waves against the walls. See mugs lifted, clink together, and set down again with a soft thud. The air is thick with the smell of smoke, roasted meat, and damp wool drying near the fire. Here, in this cozy, crowded space, people found relief. A farmer might loosen the weight of the day from his shoulders. A craftsman might finally allow himself a moment of levity after hours of careful, repetitive work. A traveler might share stories from distant places while villagers listened with wonder. Alcohol softened the boundaries between people, letting them laugh a little easier, speak a little more openly, and feel a little less alone. Not all drinking was joyful, of course. Some evenings ended in arguments or exhaustion, but many ended simply with tired smiles and the unwinding of shoulders that had carried too much for too long. Even monks, who lived structured, spiritual lives behind monastery walls, brewed their own elesh, stronger and more carefully crafted than those found in villages. And though they were meant to drink in moderation, they too sometimes felt the warm relaxation that came from a cup too many. Through all of this, alcohol served as something more than just a drink. It was a small refuge from hardship, a way to quiet the mind, an anchor of community, and one of the few comforts available in a world where pleasures were scarce and labor was constant. It helped people forget their pain for a little while. It brought them closer together. It helped them endure long winters and celebrate short harvests. And so, as the night settles and the tavern glows with firelight, you can almost feel the gentle hum of conversation wrapping around you like a blanket. The voices soften, the laughter fades, and outside, snow begins to fall quietly against the wooden walls. For many medieval people, this small warmth was enough to carry them through another day. When you're ready, we will step even deeper into the medieval world, following those who turn not only to ale, but to herbs, mushrooms, and the mysterious forces of nature. Chapter 3: The Herbalists and Their Quiet Knowledge. As we leave the warmth of the tavern behind and step into the softer parts of the medieval world, the path leads toward the edge of the village, where fields give way to forest and the air becomes still. It is here, in quiet clearings and along winding woodland trails, that the herbalists worked. These were the gatherers, the healers, the quiet observers of nature. They lived half in the world of people and half in the world of plants, and many villagers looked to them with a mixture of respect, curiosity, and sometimes fear. Herbalists knew the land intimately. They knew which plants sprouted first after winter's thaw, which roots grew deepest beneath the soil, which leaves offered comfort, and which should be touched only with caution. Imagine an herbalist walking slowly through a forest in the earliest hours of the morning, long before the village awakens. A woven basket hangs from her arm. She moves deliberately, eyes searching the forest floor for familiar shapes and colors. Dew collects on her cloak, and the sound of her footsteps is soft against the earth. She pauses beside a cluster of plants, gently brushing away leaves to reveal a root with branching arms, the mandrake, mysterious and potent. This knowledge was passed down quietly from one generation to the next, whispered more than spoken. Many plants they worked with had powerful effects on the human mind. Some made pain fade into something distant and bearable. Some brought sleep to those who had not slept for days. Others softened grief or eased the tremors of fear. And a few, rare and carefully guarded, opened the mind in ways that felt otherworldly. Herbalists prepared their remedies with the kind of patience that comes from deep understanding. A root might be dried for days, then crushed slowly by hand. Leaves might be steeped in warm water until their scent filled the air with something earthy and calming. Oils might be mixed with herbs to create salves that warmed the skin and soothed the body. Every step mattered, every detail carried meaning. To some villagers, this knowledge was comforting. It promised relief in a world with few comforts. To others, it was unsettling. Anything that could change the mind, even gently, seemed to come from a place beyond normal understanding. And so the herbalist's home often stood slightly apart, a place people visited quietly, sometimes under the veil of evening, seeking remedies they were not always eager to discuss openly. Imagine now an herbalist sitting at a wooden table lit by a small oil lamp. The room smells of dried flowers and earth. Bundles of plants hang overhead, their silhouettes swaying slightly in the draft that slips beneath the door. She grinds a mixture of herbs with thoughtful movements, creating a powder meant to calm someone whose nights have been filled with restless dreams. Her work is neither hurried nor careless. It is a craft shaped by experience, guided by intuition, and grounded in the quiet confidence that nature holds answers for those who know how to look. Some herbs she works with can soften the mind in deeper, stranger ways. When used carefully, they bring on visions or sensations that feel like stepping into another world. In a time without science to explain such things, these experiences were seen as messages, omens, or glimpses beyond the ordinary. Those who felt these effects spoke of floating above the ground, hearing voices in the wind, or seeing shapes that flickered just beyond the edges of sight. For the herbalist, these reactions were not surprising. They were simply part of the plant's nature. She respected their power and used them sparingly, always aware that such knowledge brought both gratitude and suspicion. A healer was loved when a remedy worked and questioned when it did not. But still, she continued her work, moving through the forest with soft steps, gathering what the earth offered, and handing out comfort one small, careful dose at a time. As night falls in the forest and the trees fade into darkness, the herbalist returns home, her basket now full. She closes her door, lights her lamp, and begins the quiet process of preparing the plants that will help her village face another day. Whenever you're ready, we will step deeper into the forest and discover the stranger side of nature, one shaped by mushrooms, visions, and the shifting borders between reality and imagination. Chapter 4: Mushrooms, Visions, and the Forest's Hidden Language. Beyond the herbalist's familiar paths, deeper in the forest where light filters down in soft, shifting rays, lies a world that feels older and more mysterious than anything in the village. The air here is cooler, tinged with the scent of damp earth and moss. The trees grow taller, their branches reaching so high that the sky becomes a distant, flickering thing. It is in this quiet place, where footsteps soften into silence, that mushrooms emerge, small, secretive, and full of strange power. Mushrooms were unlike any other plant the medieval people knew. They appeared suddenly after rain, as if conjured from the earth by unseen hands. Some were harmless, some were deadly, and some had effects that no one could quite explain. Their colors varied: deep browns, pale yellows, ghostly whites, and the unmistakable red capped with white spots that dotted the forest floor like scattered drops of paint. These red and white mushrooms, with their almost magical appearance, caught the eye of travelers and herbalists alike. Imagine a gatherer kneeling beside a ring of mushrooms, their circular arrangement forming what looked like a doorway or a symbol left by something unseen. The forest is quiet around them, the kind of quiet that makes even breath feel loud. They reach out, carefully inspecting each cap, perhaps feeling that there is something unusual about their pattern or their presence. Fairy rings, as people later called them, stirred the imagination. They were thought to be places where otherworldly beings had danced in the night, leaving behind a mark that humans stumbled upon by chance. When certain mushrooms were eaten, intentionally or unknowingly, they opened a door inside the mind. The world changed shape. Colors deepened. Shadows moved in ways they had not before. Sounds echoed strangely, growing fuller or stretching into long, distant melodies. Some described feeling weightless, as though their feet no longer touched the ground. Others felt their thoughts drift away from them, floating through the trees like mist. A few saw figures darting between branches, small, quick, and impossibly light, like spirits made from moonlight. To people who lived in a world governed by superstition and belief, such experiences were never dismissed. They were signs, messages, or warnings. They were proof of forces beyond human understanding. A person who returned from the forest pale and shaken, speaking of lights that hovered above the ground or voices that whispered from unseen places, was taken seriously. Whether their encounter was considered a blessing or a danger depended on the nature of their story, and on who heard it. Even those who never tasted these mushrooms sensed that the forest held something unusual. There were places where the air felt thick, almost vibrating with energy. There were clearings that seemed too quiet, too still, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Travelers sometimes rushed through these spots, refusing to look back, convinced that something had been watching them. And others lingered, feeling drawn to the strange beauty of the place, as though the forest had opened a rare window into its deepest mysteries. Imagine now a wanderer sitting at the base of a tall, ancient tree. They have eaten a mushroom without knowing what it might do. Slowly, the sunlight filtering through the branches begins to shimmer. The patterns of leaves overhead shift and dance. The forest seems to breathe. A wave of warmth spreads through their body, followed by a tingling sensation in their fingertips. They close their eyes and see shapes forming behind their eyelids, colors swirling like smoke, images rising and fading before they can be understood. For a moment, they feel both small and infinite, connected to the world and yet drifting far above it. When they return to themselves, the forest looks ordinary again, and yet something feels different, as though they have crossed a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. They walk home slowly, carrying the memory of what they saw, unsure whether to speak of it or keep it tucked away like a fragile secret. In a world without science to explain such events, people filled the silence with stories. They spoke of forest spirits, of fairies who danced in circles at night, of lights that guided or misled travelers. These tales became part of the culture, carried from one generation to the next, growing richer and more detailed each time they were told. And though the truth of the experiences varied from person to person, the meaning remained the same. The forest was alive, aware, and full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough, or careless enough, to wander too far. We will continue our journey soon, stepping closer to the darker side of medieval life, where smoke, illness, and the unknown shaped visions far stranger than any found in the forest. Chapter 5: Smoke, Shadows, and the Accidental Highs of Medieval Homes. As we leave the forest and return to the village, the air changes once again. The scent of pine and wet earth fades, replaced by the familiar mixture of wood smoke, cooked grains, and the faint sharpness of livestock nearby. Medieval homes were small and simple, built from timber, clay, or stone, with roofs that creaked gently in the wind. They offered shelter, warmth, and safety, yet they also hid dangers that went unnoticed for centuries. Most houses had only a single room, sometimes two if the family was fortunate. At the center of this space was a hearth, the heart of the home. It glowed day and night, providing heat for cooking and comfort against the cold. But unlike modern fireplaces, these hearths lacked chimneys. Smoke drifted upward and lingered, clinging to the air and the beams overhead. It seeped into clothing and bedding. It settled into the lungs. It softened outlines and blurred the edges of everything within the room. Imagine stepping into a medieval home during the early evening. The room is dim, lit by the flicker of firelight. Shadows dance across the walls, stretching and shrinking in time with the flames. The air feels thick, almost hazy, carrying the warmth of the fire but also the residue of hours and hours of burning wood. People sit close together, talking softly or simply resting after a long day. And all around them, the smoke moves in slow, curling patterns, weaving through the air like a living thing. This constant exposure affected the mind in subtle ways. Breathing thick smoke could make a person lightheaded or dizzy. It could bring on sudden waves of fatigue or unexpected bursts of energy. At times, it created a strange sense of unreality, as though the world were slightly out of focus. People sometimes mistook these sensations for spiritual experiences or warnings from beyond. A child might wake in the night convinced they had seen a figure standing near the doorway, only to realize it was nothing more than a shifting shadow cast by the fire. An adult might feel an unexplained heaviness in their limbs or a sense that the room was tilting gently beneath them. Carbon monoxide, though unknown to them, filled their homes as well. Its effects were mysterious and unpredictable. A person might feel warm and peaceful, lulled into a dreamy state without understanding why. Others experienced confusion, vivid dreams, or waking hallucinations. In a time when spiritual beliefs shaped daily life, such sensations were rarely dismissed. They were interpreted as messages, omens, or the presence of something unseen. Imagine a woman stirring a pot over the fire, her eyes half closed as the smoke wraps around her like a veil. She pauses for a moment, feeling a light buzzing at the edge of her thoughts. She glances toward the far wall and thinks she sees someone standing there, though the room is empty. She blinks, shakes her head gently, and continues her work. To her, the moment is not strange. It is simply part of living in a world where the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual often felt thin. During the long, cold winters, families spent even more time inside, breathing the same smoky air. Nights were long, and sleep was fragmented. People drifted in and out of slumber, dreams blending with waking thoughts. It was easy to believe that spirits moved through the house, whispering messages or visiting loved ones. Illness, too, brought fever dreams that blurred the line between reality and imagination. Without modern explanations, people relied on stories and beliefs to make sense of these experiences. Even the sounds contributed to the atmosphere: the crackle of flames, the whistle of wind through the boards, the soft groaning of wood expanding in the heat. In the darkness, these sounds could become anything: a whisper, a footstep, a sigh. A reminder that the world outside the door was vast, mysterious, and full of forces that humans could not fully understand. Accidental highs were the quiet companions of medieval life. They did not arrive with ceremony or intention. They came with the daily act of surviving, of warming a home, cooking a meal, and trying to endure the cold. And though medieval people did not know the causes, they understood the feelings. They knew when the air felt heavy or strange. They recognized when dreams became too vivid or when shadows seemed to move on their own. They accepted these moments as part of life, woven into the rhythm of the seasons and the shifting of the night. In a world lit only by fire and shaped by belief, even ordinary things like smoke and shadow could become gateways to experiences that felt otherworldly. When you are ready, we will move on to a chapter filled with warmth and celebration, where music and laughter fill the night, and the air carries something very different than smoke. Chapter 6: Festivals, Feasts, and the Gentle Highs of Celebration. After days filled with hard work and nights softened by firelight, medieval life also offered rare but precious moments of joy. Times when the village gathered as one, when routine loosened its grip, and when people allowed themselves to breathe more freely. These were the festivals and feasts, scattered throughout the year like small lanterns glowing in the long darkness of time. Imagine a village preparing for a celebration. The air hums with anticipation even before the first decorations appear. Banners are hung, simple but colorful, swaying gently in the breeze. Tables are carried outside and placed in long rows, where food will later be shared by everyone regardless of wealth or status. Children dart between them with uncontainable excitement. Even the oldest villagers seem to move with a lighter step, knowing that tonight will be different from all other nights. As evening approaches, the sun sinks low, painting the sky in deep gold and soft rose. Torches are lit, lining the edges of the square, their flames flickering in greeting. The smell of roasting meat drifts through the air, mingling with the sweetness of baked bread and the spiced scent of warm ale. Soon the sound of music begins, a lute plucking a gentle melody, followed by the thumping rhythm of a drum. Voices rise and fall in laughter, the kind that comes easily when burdens are briefly lifted. Here, beneath the open sky, people experience a different kind of high, one born not from plants or potions, but from togetherness. The mood grows brighter as the night deepens. The elderly, who rarely dance, find themselves tapping their feet. Young people whirl through the square in loose circles, hands clasped, faces glowing in the torchlight. Some stumble a little from drink, but even that has a warmth to it, a kind of careless joy that softens the edges of the world. If you walk slowly through the crowd in your imagination, you would see the small details that make these nights unforgettable. A child staring wide-eyed at the fire juggler who performs in the center of the square. A group of women weaving garlands of flowers to place on their hair, two friends sharing a whispered joke, their laughter spilling out into the cold night air. A traveler playing a tune no one has heard before, causing the entire village to pause and listen. On nights like this, worries lose their weight. The ache in the back, the exhaustion of labor, the quiet fears that creep into one's mind during lonely hours, all of these seem to fade beneath the glow of celebration. For a few hours, life becomes softer, brighter, and more hopeful. Even the stars feel closer, shining more clearly above the rooftops. Alcohol, of course, flows freely during festivals. But this time, it does not serve as an escape from hardship or a numbing of pain. Instead, it becomes part of the merriment, adding warmth to the laughter and ease to the movements of dancers. People raise their cups to one another, not to forget, but to celebrate the simple fact that they are alive and together in this moment. As the night wears on, a gentle tiredness settles over the square. Songs slow to a lullaby-like rhythm. Parents gather their children, sleepy-eyed and content. The torches dim, and the crowd begins to thin. Yet no one feels disappointed. The glow of the festival lingers in their hearts, a comforting memory to carry into the long days ahead. For medieval people, celebrations were more than entertainment. They were necessary. They reminded people that joy was still possible, that community mattered, and that life, even in its hardness, had moments of sweetness. These festivals were the closest many came to feeling truly free from the weight of existence, and their soft, collective high was one of the most cherished experiences of the year. When you are ready, we will step into the shadows of the night and explore a different kind of altered state, one shaped by fear, dreams, and the strange workings of the mind. Chapter 7: Nightmares, Visions, and the Shadows that Moved in the Dark. When the last embers of the fireplace dim and the village finally settles into silence, a different world awakens, a world shaped not by daylight and routine, but by sleep, dreams, and the imagination's restless wanderings. Night held a special power in the Middle Ages. Without street lamps or glowing windows, darkness was complete and enveloping, and the human mind filled that darkness with whatever it feared or longed for most. Imagine a medieval home after the fire has quieted. The room is nearly black, lit only by a faint glow from dying coals or a thin slice of moonlight slipping through a wooden shutter. The family sleeps close together for warmth. The only sounds are slow, rhythmic breaths and the occasional groan of settling timber. Yet in this stillness, the night becomes a place where reality loosens, and the borders between waking life and dreaming grow porous. Medieval sleep did not come in one long stretch. People often woke in the middle of the night, a period they called the watch. During those quiet, half-conscious moments, dreams lingered like mist and often blended with the room around them. It was during these hours that the mind, free from the day's concerns, created visions that felt vivid, immediate, and all too real. Sleep paralysis, though unnamed, was a familiar experience. A person might awaken, unable to move, with a crushing weight on their chest. Their eyes, barely open, would search the dim room and sometimes, under the influence of fear and the residual effects of smoke-filled air, see shapes that should not be there. A shadow in the corner that seemed to breathe. A figure crouched by the bedside. Something sitting on them, heavy and silent. Without the language of science to explain this, people spoke of night demons, spirits, or witches visiting in the dark. Children would wake crying, convinced they had seen someone watching them from the doorway. Adults, too, whispered of strange encounters. Some saw lights dancing along the ceiling beams. Others heard footsteps when no one was awake. Dreams carried the weight of prophecy and warning. A nightmare was not merely a trick of the mind, it was a message, from God, from spirits, or from forces beyond human sight. Imagine a man lying on his straw mattress, his breath halted in his chest. The night is utterly silent, yet he feels a presence near him, cold and unyielding. His eyes strain to make sense of the darkness, and for a moment, he believes he sees a figure crouched beside him, its outline shifting with the faint glow of the coals. His heart races. He tries to cry out, but no sound escapes. Minutes pass like hours until suddenly, the weight lifts, the shadow fades, and he can breathe again. When morning comes, he describes the encounter in hushed tones. His neighbors nod solemnly, for they too have felt such terrors. Illness brought visions of another kind. Fever blurred the edges of reality, turning simple objects into strange, shifting forms. A cracked wooden beam might appear like a twisting serpent. A blanket could ripple as though alive. These experiences, unforgettable in their intensity, fed stories of spirits and creatures that haunted the night. Even the house itself contributed to the atmosphere. The groan of wood in the cold, the whisper of wind beneath the door, the scratching of mice behind the walls, each of these sounds could become something more in the mind of a half-asleep villager. A warning, a presence, a visitor. Yet these visions and fears also connected people to belief, myth, and community. They shaped stories passed down through generations, tales told beside fires on winter nights, reminders that the world was full of mysteries not easily explained. And though frightening, these experiences were accepted as part of life, inevitable encounters with forces that moved between the seen and unseen. In the darkness of the medieval night, the mind roamed freely, unbound by reason or daylight certainty. Dreams took on the weight of truth, and shadows were never just shadows. They were possibilities, fragments of another world that brushed against this one when the village slept. Soon, we will explore a different kind of vision, one curated not by fear or dreams, but by rituals, devotion, and the soft glow of sacred places. Chapter 8: Monasteries, Incense, and the Gentle Heights of Faith. Not all altered states in the Middle Ages came from fear or uncertainty. Some arose from devotion, from ritual, and from the quiet longing of the human spirit to reach beyond itself. To understand this, we step away from the bustling village and follow a narrow path that winds through fields and low hills, leading to a place where silence has its own kind of music, the monastery. Imagine a stone building standing alone on a gentle rise of land, its walls weathered by time and wind. The monastery is simple yet impressive, built not for grandeur but for endurance. Tall, narrow windows let in soft, filtered light. The heavy wooden doors open into a world shaped by discipline, routine, and reverence. Here, monks devote their lives to prayer, reflection, and the quiet search for meaning. Step inside, and the air changes. It is cooler, calmer, and filled with the faint scent of incense. This scent is not sharp or overwhelming. It is subtle, drifting slowly through the corridors like a quiet breath. It is meant to soothe, to clear the mind, and to lift thoughts toward contemplation. Centuries before anyone understood the effects of aromatic smoke on the brain, monks had discovered that certain scents had the power to relax the body and deepen focus. The chapel, at the heart of the monastery, glows with candlelight. Rows of flickering flames cast warm reflections on the stone walls, and the light seems to pulse gently, almost as though it is breathing with the monks. Stained glass windows, colored in deep blues and reds, soften the daylight into a muted, heavenly glow. As the monks take their places, the room becomes a landscape of shadows and light, each flicker adding to the sense that something sacred fills the air. When they begin to chant, the sound rises slowly, deep and resonant. Their voices blend in perfect harmony, creating a vibration that seems to enter the body as much as the ears. The rhythm is steady, repetitive, and calming. It is not meant to excite but to lull the mind into a state of openness, where thoughts drift, loosen, and eventually dissolve into something quiet and expansive. In these moments, many monks experienced sensations that felt like stepping beyond the ordinary world. Some described feeling weightless, as though their bodies no longer belonged fully to the earth. Others spoke of warmth spreading through their chest, or of visions of light that intensified behind their closed eyes. These experiences were deeply personal and never spoken of lightly, for they were seen not as hallucinations or tricks of the mind, but as glimpses of something divine. A monk might kneel in prayer, hands folded, eyes closed, and feel a sense of connection so profound that tears slipped silently down his face. Another might sense a presence beside him, not with fear, but with a deep peace that fills his heart. The line between the physical and spiritual world felt thin within these stone walls, softened by discipline, ritual, and the gentle influence of incense and song. The monastery was a place where the human mind could slow to its quietest rhythm. Days were structured around prayer, work, and silence. Meals were simple. Distractions were few. Over time, this steady routine shaped the mind into something receptive and calm, ready to experience the subtle shifts that came from long hours of contemplation. Imagine now a monk sitting alone after the evening prayer, the last candle burning low beside him. The room is almost completely still. He breathes slowly, the scent of incense lingering in the air. His thoughts begin to soften, drifting like smoke rising toward the ceiling. For a moment, he feels as though he is floating gently upward, not in body but in spirit. It is a sensation impossible to describe, a quiet, uplifting experience that feels deeply true to him. He opens his eyes only when the candle flickers out, returning him softly to the world around him. These experiences were not rare in monasteries. They were part of the spiritual journey, part of the longing to touch something beyond the daily struggle of life. While villagers interpreted visions through the lens of fear or superstition, monks saw them as confirmations of faith, as moments when the divine world brushed against their own. In this sacred environment, the mind could open to gentler highs, ones born from devotion, rhythm, scent, and silence. When you are ready, we will continue onward into a chapter where emotions themselves become a kind of intoxication, shaped by grief, hope, and the unpredictable storms of the human heart. Chapter 9: Emotional Highs, Grief, Hope, and the Storms of the Human Heart. Not all altered states required drink, herbs, or incense. Some came quietly from within, rising from the deepest parts of the human experience. Emotion itself could change a person's world just as profoundly as any substance. And in the Middle Ages, where life moved slowly and the weight of existence was often heavy, emotions surged with particular strength. Imagine a family gathered around a small wooden table. A loved one has been lost to illness, and the room is quiet except for soft weeping. The grief is overwhelming, reaching into the chest and gripping it tightly. In such moments, people sometimes felt detached from their surroundings, as though the room had become distant or strangely unreal. Tears blurred their vision. Their breath came unevenly. Shadows seemed to shift on the walls even though nothing had moved. Grief was not numbness. It was a wave that could lift a person up, spin them around, and leave them unsure of where they stood. In the Middle Ages, such experiences were often described in spiritual terms. A grieving person might say they felt the presence of the one they lost, standing nearby or whispering reassuring words. Others spoke of dreams so vivid they seemed more like visits than illusions. The line between memory and vision softened when the heart was aching, and people accepted this as a natural part of mourning. Then there was joy, a powerful force of its own. Moments of happiness could feel sharp and bright in a world where pleasure was rare. A successful harvest after a hard season could lift entire villages into a state of euphoria. Children would run through the fields laughing, adults would dance with abandon. Even the most serious elders might smile as though a heavy cloak had been lifted from their shoulders. These emotional highs came with a kind of clarity. The air felt lighter. Colors seemed brighter. The future felt hopeful, even if only for a moment. People often describe these experiences in ways that sound like poetry because the feelings themselves were larger than ordinary language. Imagine a woman who hasn't seen her husband for months while he worked in a distant town. When he finally returns, she runs to him, and the world around her seems to vanish. For a heartbeat, she feels suspended in a sensation that is both overwhelming and grounding. It is not a chemical high, but an emotional one, a rush of relief, love, and release. Fear, too, played its part. In a world full of unknown dangers, fear could sweep through the mind like a sudden gust of wind. Hearing a wolf howl in the distance, or seeing a strange figure on the edge of the forest at dusk, could send thoughts racing and senses sharpening. Fear could heighten a person's awareness, making every sound seem louder and every shadow deeper. This heightened state often left people trembling long after the danger had passed, their hearts beating fast as if still caught in the moment. During moments of stress or anticipation, the mind sometimes created sensations that felt extraordinary. A person waiting anxiously for news might feel their surroundings blur. Someone standing in a crowded marketplace might suddenly feel dizzy or separate from themselves for a few seconds, as though they were watching the world from a great distance. Medieval people interpreted these fleeting experiences as signs or messages, either warnings from above or tests of resilience. Hope, strangely enough, could also bring its own kind of intoxication. Looking forward to a possible change in fortune, or the arrival of spring after a long winter could fill a person with a buoyant sense of optimism. This sense lifted them, made them walk a little faster, and brightened their dreams. In a world where hardships were constant, emotional highs were treasured. They reminded people that the heart was capable of soaring even when the body was weary. They showed that the mind could expand beyond its daily limits, offering glimpses of something bigger than survival. Some feelings were so strong they felt like a visitation from another realm. Others were simply a release, a temporary rising above the weight of the moment. Emotions shaped medieval life as deeply as any herb or potion. They brought people together, pulled them apart, inspired stories, and left imprints on the soul. And in their most intense forms, they became a kind of natural, internal intoxication, one that every person, regardless of status or belief, experienced in their own quiet way. Soon, we will step into a place where emotion, belief, and imagination meet, the world of medieval healers and their strange mixtures of hope, knowledge, and superstition. Chapter 10: Healers, Midwives, and the Quiet Magic of Their Craft. To understand the Middle Ages fully, we must turn our attention to the healers and midwives, figures who walked a delicate line between necessity and suspicion. They were essential to their communities, yet often misunderstood. Their knowledge of plants, the body, and the unseen forces of life placed them both in positions of trust and under the shadow of fear. In a world without physicians for ordinary people, these women, and occasionally men, held wisdom that seemed almost magical. Imagine a small cottage standing at the edge of the village. Its windows glow warmly at dusk, and bundles of herbs hang from the rafters, rustling softly when the door opens. Inside, the healer moves with practiced ease, selecting leaves, roots, and powders that she knows intimately. Each plant carries a story. Each mixture has a purpose. She has learned over years of careful observation how different remedies soothe pain, ease childbirth, calm the mind, or bring sleep to the restless. Her knowledge was not written in books. It lived in memory, passed down through generations, shared quietly and often secretly. Many herbs she gathered at dawn, when the world was still cool and quiet. Some she collected by moonlight, believing the night strengthened certain properties. Whether or not these beliefs had scientific grounding, they shaped the rhythms of her life and gave her work a sense of ritual and respect. There were times when her remedies worked so well that people believed she had special gifts. A child's fever might break after only a single dose of her medicine. A woman in labor might find sudden relief after hours of struggling. A man plagued by nightmares might finally sleep deeply after drinking her soothing tea. These successes strengthened her reputation and her place within the community. But there were other times, moments of uncertainty or tragedy, when her knowledge could not match the severity of illness or injury. When someone died despite her efforts, whispers began. Not loud at first, but soft, curling through the village like smoke. Some wondered if she had used the wrong herb. Others wondered if she had angered unseen forces. Suspicion bloomed quickly in a world where understanding was incomplete and fear never far away. Imagine the healer preparing a mixture that includes herbs with mild, dreamlike effects. She grinds them carefully, knowing they must be used sparingly. She gives them to someone whose pain has become unbearable, hoping to ease their suffering. The person rests, their breathing deepening, their body relaxing. Hours later, they speak of floating above their bed, of seeing shapes or hearing voices that felt real and comforting. Such experiences were not unusual. Many herbs carried these properties. But in the Middle Ages, people interpreted them in ways far removed from natural explanation. Some believed they had glimpsed spirits or angels. Others thought they had traveled beyond their body. The healer listened respectfully, knowing that these visions were simply effects of the plants she used, but never contradicting anyone's belief. To do so would be to challenge the very fabric of medieval thought. Midwives, too, held great responsibility. They brought new life into the world, often under difficult circumstances. Childbirth was dangerous and unpredictable, and the midwife's calm presence could mean the difference between life and death. She used herbs to ease pain, to steady breath, to stop bleeding, or to help a child enter the world more gently. Her skills were invaluable, yet always at risk of being misunderstood. If a birth went smoothly, she was praised. If complications arose, suspicion grew. People sometimes feared the very knowledge that had saved them so many times before. The blending of life and death, comfort and danger, gave healers and midwives an aura of mystery that could be seen either as a blessing or as something darker. Imagine a midwife kneeling beside a mother, her hands steady and her voice low and reassuring. The room is dim, lit only by a lantern. Outside, the wind presses against the walls. The midwife prepares a small vial of herbs to help ease the pain, whispering a quiet prayer as she does. She has done this many times, and yet each birth feels sacred, filled with both joy and fragile uncertainty. When the child finally arrives and cries out, she smiles with relief. For a moment, the world feels full of light and hope. Yet even in this moment of happiness, she knows that her work will always walk the boundary between trust and fear. The healers and midwives of the Middle Ages lived in a world that needed them desperately, yet often struggled to understand the nature of their craft. Their remedies brought comfort, their knowledge saved lives, and their hands guided countless people through pain and uncertainty. Chapter 11: Rituals, Charms, and the Strange Comfort of the Unseen. Beyond herbs, dreams, and emotion lay another world entirely, a world woven from belief, superstition, and the quiet rituals that shaped medieval life from morning until night. People in the Middle Ages lived with an ever-present sense that forces unseen guided, protected, or threatened them. In this world, charms and rituals were not curiosities. They were necessities. They offered a sense of control in a world where so much was unpredictable. Imagine a woman tying a small bundle of dried flowers above her doorway. To her, this was not decoration. It was a shield, a way to keep misfortune from entering her home. Perhaps her mother taught her to do it. Perhaps her grandmother before that. The knowledge traveled through generations, surviving longer than written words. These bundles were believed to protect against illness, spirits, bad luck, or even wandering eyes of envy. Whether or not the charm worked did not matter as much as the comfort it provided. It gave people a sense of safety in a world shaped by uncertainty. Travelers often carried charms as well. A simple stone, a carved wooden token, or a piece of iron worn around the neck. Some believed these objects guided them through unfamiliar paths. Others believed they brought courage or clarity. When someone walked alone through a dense forest or across a quiet field at dusk, the charm in their pocket felt like a companion. It kept fear at bay just enough for them to continue forward. Rituals accompany nearly every part of life. Before eating, people murmured words of thanks or protection. Before leaving the house, they made small gestures meant to ward off bad fortune. When someone was ill, neighbors gathered to whisper prayers, light candles, or burn herbs believed to carry healing power. These actions were not dramatic or elaborate. They were woven seamlessly into the flow of daily life, like breaths taken without thought. Imagine a family preparing for winter. They gather in the main room as the first snow falls quietly outside. The mother sprinkles a pinch of salt near the door, believing it will keep sickness from crossing the threshold. The father hangs a small horseshoe above the entrance, its curve facing upward to hold good luck. Children watch with reverence, sensing that something important is happening even if they do not fully understand why. These small gestures brought comfort when the world outside felt harsh and unforgiving. Some rituals involved mild intoxicants, herbal mixtures that eased anxiety or brought on light, dreamlike states. A healer might prepare such a mixture for someone troubled by bad dreams or unexplained fear. The person would drink it slowly, feeling warmth spread through their body. Their thoughts would soften, their worries drift away. In this gentle state, they might believe they had received a message from the divine or found clarity where confusion had been before. The mind, unburdened, could finally breathe. In moments of great need, rituals became more elaborate. A midwife might chant softly over a laboring mother, calling upon protection. A shepherd might whisper into the wind before releasing his flock at dawn. Villagers might gather in the churchyard to ask for rain or to plead for an end to illness. These moments were filled with collective hope, each person adding their voice to a tide of longing that felt powerful enough to touch the heavens. There were also rituals meant to communicate with the dead. People believed that loved ones lingered close, watching, guiding, and sometimes warning. A candle placed in the window at night invited a lost soul to find peace. A whisper spoken at the grave carried a message across the boundary between life and death. At times, people experienced dreams so vivid and comforting that they believed their loved ones had truly visited them. These dreams brought solace during grief, easing the heavy ache of loss. Imagine someone sitting beside a freshly dug grave, the cold air stinging their face. They speak quietly, telling the departed what they wish they had said before. The ground is still soft, the world still feels wrong without that familiar presence. Yet as they speak, something in their heart loosens. Whether from grief, belief, or the emotional release spilling from their chest, they feel a sense of connection that transcends explanation. For a moment, they are not alone. These charms and rituals did not simply shape medieval life. They gave people a language for their fears and hopes. They transformed uncertainty into action, even if the action was symbolic. They bridged the gap between the visible and the invisible, giving people a sense of agency in a world larger than their understanding. Soon, we will step deeper into the realm where these beliefs mixed with fear, misunderstanding, and the darker interpretations of altered states. Chapter 12: Witchcraft, Misunderstandings, and the Shadows of Fear. As medieval people moved through a world filled with mysterious forces, rituals, and unexplained sensations, their understanding of these experiences grew complicated. Belief and fear often intertwined, creating shadows around anyone whose knowledge or behavior fell outside what the community considered ordinary. And from these shadows emerged one of the most enduring and misunderstood figures of the medieval imagination, the witch. Yet to understand this idea, we must step gently. The people accused of witchcraft were rarely the figures of folklore that later stories described. They were often ordinary individuals, women more often than men, who simply held knowledge that others did not. They tended herbs, delivered babies, or lived alone in places where the forest pressed close. They understood plants that eased pain or brought on dreams. They knew how to read the weather, soothe a frightened child, or calm a restless mind. Their skills were invaluable, yet in a world shaped by fear of the unknown, they could just as easily become targets of suspicion. Imagine a small house at the edge of the village, partly hidden by overgrown shrubs and tall grasses. Its roof sags slightly, and smoke curls lazily from the chimney. Inside, an older woman tends her herbs in quiet concentration. She does not smile often, but she is kind. She has helped countless villagers through fever and childbirth, and yet whispers about her grow whenever something mysterious happens. The unknown is always easier to explain when someone can be blamed for it. If a cow falls ill, if a child dreams vividly, if someone wakes from sleep speaking of a shadow they saw in the night, the whispers drift toward her door. People want answers, and in the absence of understanding, they turn to the simplest explanation. Perhaps someone caused these things on purpose. The same herbs that heal can, in the mind of the fearful, become tools of harm. Some herbs did have strong effects, plants that cause hallucinations, dizziness, or dreams so intense they felt like reality. If someone experienced these sensations after taking a remedy, they might believe they had been touched by magic, or by something darker. They might see visions, speak of strange creatures, or describe floating or flying sensations. In a world where science was unknown, these reactions were interpreted through the lens of belief, superstition, and fear. Imagine a man who takes a mixture meant to ease his pain. As it settles into his body, he begins to feel weightless, as though he is drifting above the ground. His limbs feel distant. His sight warps slightly, colors deepening at the edges. He breathes deeply, each breath expanding into something larger than himself. Later, when he tries to explain the sensation, he says he felt bewitched, as though something unseen had carried him away. Others listen with wide eyes, unsure what to think. They forget the healer's intention and remember only the experience. And so fear spreads. Rumors sharpen. The line between healer and witch grows thin, blurred by misunderstanding and the powerful stories people tell themselves in the dark. In times of hardship, especially when harvests failed or illness swept through villages, these fears grew stronger. People needed someone to blame, and the ones who lived on the margins of understanding often bore the weight of that blame. Yet the idea of witchcraft in the Middle Ages was not always tied to malice. Many believed witches had contact with nature, with spirits, or with forces beyond human reach. Some villagers even sought them out for guidance or protection. A witch, in their imagination, was someone who understood the language of the forest, who could interpret signs and dreams, who could navigate the unseen. These beliefs were both fearful and reverent, shaped by the same uncertainty that governed much of medieval life. Imagine a woman sitting in her small home, preparing a remedy by lamplight. The village around her sleeps. She works carefully, her movements deliberate and calm. Outside, the wind presses against the walls, carrying with it the sound of distant branches swaying. She does not think of herself as anything unusual. She is simply doing what she has always done, helping where she can, using the knowledge she learned long ago. Yet she knows, deep inside, that her place in the community is fragile. Kindness may protect her today, but fear could turn tomorrow. In a world without explanations, the mind fills gaps with stories. And stories, once spoken, take on lives of their own. The medieval fear of witchcraft grew slowly, fed by misunderstandings and amplified by the strange experiences people had, experiences shaped by herbs, dreams, sickness, smoke, and emotion. These sensations were real, but their interpretations were shaped by belief. Chapter 13: Nobles, Feasts, and the Luxuries That Softened the Mind. While villagers relied on herbs, smoke, and simple pleasures to ease the burdens of life, the noble class experienced altered states of mind in a very different way. Wealth allowed them access to things ordinary people rarely saw: exotic spices, foreign wines, decadent banquets, and substances carried across continents by merchants who risked oceans and deserts. In their great halls and private chambers, the wealthy sought comfort, indulgence, and escape through the luxuries of the medieval world. Imagine stepping into a grand hall lit by dozens of torches burning steadily along the stone walls. Their warm glow dances across polished wooden tables set with silver plates and goblets of imported wine. Tapestries depicting ancient myths hang from the walls, their bright colors softened by age and flickering light. The air is thick with the smell of roasted meats, spices from lands far beyond the horizon, and the sweetness of honey pastries. The hum of conversation rises and falls like a tide, punctuated by sudden bursts of laughter. Here, nobles experienced their own kind of intoxication. Wine flowed generously, much stronger than the ale drunk by the villagers. Some nights it was red and heavy, warming the body with each sip. Other nights it was white, sharp, and fragrant, carried in by merchants who had traveled through bustling markets and over dangerous mountain passes. The nobles drank slowly at first, savoring the taste, but as the night deepened, restraint slipped away. The wine relaxed their posture, loosened their tongues, and softened their thoughts. Excess was not only tolerated, it was expected. Long feasts were a display of wealth and power. Servants moved constantly between the tables, refilling goblets and bringing new dishes, spiced stews, roasted game birds, cheeses aged in distant monasteries, and fruits preserved in honey. With each taste, the nobles felt the world grow warmer, their worries drifting into the haze created by food, drink, and the constant glow of torchlight. But wine was not the only luxury that transported the mind. Some nobles experimented with rare ingredients brought from far-off lands, herbs, powders, and resins that no villager would have recognized. These substances, used in small amounts for scent or ritual, sometimes produced sensations that were subtle yet powerful. The sweet, almost narcotic aroma of imported resins burned in golden censers could make a person feel heavier, sleepier, or strangely uplifted. At feasts, these scents mingled with the wine and laughter, creating an atmosphere of hazy pleasure. Imagine a nobleman leaning back in his chair as musicians begin to play. The music is soft at first, harps, flutes, and gentle strings blending into a soothing melody. The nobleman closes his eyes and feels the room shift slightly, as though the ground beneath him has softened. The combination of rich food, heavy wine, and warm scents creates a quiet storm of sensation that blurs the boundary between reality and dream. The firelight seems to ripple. Voices blend together. Time slows. For some nobles, this state brought joy and contentment. For others, it unleashed hidden emotions. The weight of responsibility, the pressure of lineage, and the expectations of society often left them feeling isolated despite their wealth. In moments of indulgence, their guarded expressions softened, their voices trembled with vulnerability, and their carefully maintained composure gave way to something more human. Music contributed to this transformation. Medieval musicians understood how rhythm and melody could cradle the mind. A slow, repeating tune might lull the listener into a trance-like state. A single voice accompanied by a lute could stir deep emotion or soften resistance to the effects of wine. The great halls became places where sound and sensation merged, creating experiences that felt almost otherworldly. Feasts often stretched late into the night. As candles burned low and plates were cleared away, the nobles lingered, reluctant to let go of the comfort the evening offered. Outside, the world was quiet and cold, but inside the hall, warmth clung to the air. The final goblets of wine were poured, and conversations grew slower, softer. Some nobles became thoughtful, staring into the flames as though seeking answers. Others drifted into laughter that sounded half-dreaming. Eventually, the hall emptied, leaving only the echoes of music and footsteps behind. Servants extinguished the torches one by one, plunging the great room into darkness. The nobles returned to their chambers, carrying with them the lingering glow of the night's indulgence. In the privacy of their rooms, some slept deeply, while others stayed awake, feeling the world tilt gently around them as they sorted through the remnants of their thoughts. Chapter 14: Pilgrims, Sacred Paths, and the Highs of Spiritual Journey. There were some medieval experiences that did not take place in homes or forests or even grand halls, but stretched across long, dusty roads reaching toward distant holy places. These were the pilgrimages, journeys of faith, hope, desperation, or longing. Walking mile after mile beneath shifting skies, medieval pilgrims entered states of mind shaped by exhaustion, determination, and a deep desire for meaning. Imagine the morning a pilgrim begins their journey. The village stands quiet behind them, the air cool, the sun rising gently over the fields. Their pack is small, containing little more than bread, water, a cloak for warmth, and perhaps a charm for protection. With each step forward, they leave behind familiarity and step into uncertainty. The road ahead is long, winding over hills, through forests, across rivers, and into unknown lands. For many, this journey might last months, even years. As they walk, the rhythm of their footsteps becomes a kind of meditation. The mind begins to drift, softening its grip on the worries and routines of everyday life. The sounds of the world, birds calling, wind brushing through grass, distant church bells carried on the breeze, blend into a gentle hum. In this slow unfolding of landscape and time, pilgrims often entered states of clarity or dreaminess unlike anything they experienced at home. We must remember that most pilgrims traveled not for adventure but for healing. Some sought relief from illness, believing a holy shrine held the power to cure them. Others carried emotional wounds, grief they could not escape, guilt they could not soothe, or hopes they did not know how to express. The journey became a physical expression of these burdens, each mile walked a quiet plea for peace. Imagine a pilgrim stopping beside a river in the late afternoon. They kneel to drink, feeling the cold water shock their tired body awake. Their legs ache, their back stiffens, yet their mind feels strangely open, as though stretched by the endless horizon. They watch the sunlight ripple across the surface of the water and, for a moment, feel a sense of connection to something larger and quieter than themselves. Days pass. The landscape shifts. Fields give way to forests, forests to rocky paths to small towns where the pilgrim rests briefly before continuing onward. With each night spent beneath the stars or in the shelter of a kind stranger, the boundary between dream and waking life blurs. Long walks under the sun bring on weariness so deep it feels like drifting. Hunger sharpens the senses. Thirst gnaws gently at thought. And through all of this, the pilgrim holds on to hope. Hope that they will reach the sacred place. Hope that they will be changed. Along the road, they join others. Pilgrims share stories, prayers, and bread. Some speak of visions they experienced while walking, moments when the world glowed unnaturally bright, or when a whisper of wind carried words they could not quite understand. Others describe feeling watched over by unseen forces, whether angels, spirits, or the souls of loved ones. Exhaustion itself brought on sensations that felt profound and meaningful. One evening, as the sun sinks low and the sky turns a soft orange, imagine a group of pilgrims gathered around a small fire. They sit quietly, their faces illuminated by the shifting flames. One of them speaks of a dream they had the night before, a dream so vivid that it felt like a message. The others listen, nodding, sharing the sense that the journey is guiding them not just across land, but through the inner landscapes of their own hearts. When they finally reach their destination, perhaps a grand cathedral, a sacred well, or a simple shrine, the experience is overwhelming. The long road, the pain in their legs, the hunger, the hopes, the fears, and the dreams all gather within them like a rising tide. Some weep the moment they step into the holy sanctuary. Others fall to their knees. A few feel a sudden lightness, as though the burden they carried has lifted. Whether these sensations came from faith, relief, exhaustion, or some combination of all three, they felt transformative. Inside the holy place, incense fills the air. Candles burn in quiet rows, sending thin trails of smoke upward. The pilgrim breathes deeply, the scent calming their tired body. Their mind feels hazy, but not in an unpleasant way. It is the haze of completion, of arrival, of something finally settling inside them. The journey home will be just as long, yet different. The pilgrim has changed. Their mind has gone somewhere far beyond the physical distance traveled. And in that journey, between hope and exhaustion, belief and uncertainty, they found a state of mind that shifted their understanding of themselves and the world around them. Chapter 15: Warriors, Battlefields, and the Highs Born of Fear and Survival. Not all altered states came from quiet moments, warm fires, or gentle rituals. Some arose in the harshest places imaginable, places filled with noise, danger, and the constant nearness of death. For medieval warriors, the battlefield was a world separate from ordinary life, a place where the mind shifted into something sharp, heightened, and unlike anything experienced anywhere else. To understand this, imagine a warrior waking before dawn. The sky is dark, heavy with the promise of an approaching storm or perhaps the tension of an upcoming battle. He sits quietly, sharpening his blade by candlelight. The sound of metal scraping against stone is steady and rhythmic, a grounding ritual before chaos. Around him, others prepare just as silently, tightening straps, checking shields, whispering prayers. No one speaks loudly. Fear is present in every breath, yet the warriors hold it inside, feeling it settle beside their determination. As the first light of morning creeps across the land, the army moves toward the battlefield. The ground is uneven beneath their feet, the air damp and cold. Their hearts beat faster, sending rushes of blood through their bodies. Muscles feel tense, breath comes quicker, and senses sharpen almost painfully. Every sound seems louder: the creak of armor, the distant call of a horn, the hiss of wind through tall grass. This heightened state is a kind of natural intoxication, brought on by adrenaline and fear. The mind becomes completely focused, narrowing its attention to survival. Time itself can seem to slow. A warrior might notice every detail around him with startling clarity: the movement of an opponent's foot, the glint of sunlight on a blade, the subtle shift of weight before an attack. This awareness feels almost superhuman, as though the body is being carried by something deeper than conscious thought. Imagine the moment before two forces collide. There is a tense stillness, the quiet before an inevitable storm. Then, suddenly, the world erupts into motion. The clash of metal rings through the air. Shouts rise, sharp and desperate. The warrior feels his body move almost without his permission, guided by reflex and instinct. He strikes, blocks, steps aside, breathes hard, and yet senses none of it fully. He is both inside himself and outside himself, caught in a dreamlike intensity where emotion disappears and only action remains. Some described this feeling later as though they were watching themselves from a distance, their bodies acting with a clarity their minds could not comprehend. Others remembered only fragments, the sound of their own heartbeat, the moment an opponent's blade flashed too close, the overwhelming relief of surviving a single strike. The mind, overwhelmed by the immediacy of danger, entered a state beyond ordinary awareness. Then, as quickly as the rush began, the battle might end. The survivors, trembling and wide-eyed, would find themselves standing in a changed world. The adrenaline drained slowly, leaving behind exhaustion so deep it felt like sinking into water. Some warriors collapsed where they stood, not from injury but from the sudden weight of returning to themselves. After a battle, the emotional response could be just as powerful. Relief washed over them with a force that shook their entire body. For a moment, they felt almost euphoric, alive in a way that made ordinary life seem distant and muted. The air tasted different. Colors seemed sharper. Sounds clearer. This sensation could last minutes or hours, depending on the man and the battle. But there was another side as well. When the rush finally faded, some warriors felt hollow, disconnected, or numb. They walked through the aftermath like shadows, unsure of how to return to the quiet rhythm of normal life. They had been somewhere far beyond the familiar, and stepping back into the everyday world felt strange. Imagine a warrior sitting alone by a fire after surviving a brutal fight. His hands shake despite his efforts to steady them. The flames flicker, casting unsteady light on his face. He stares into the fire, remembering flashes of the battle, yet unable to piece them together into a coherent whole. The crackling of wood becomes soothing, one of the few sounds that does not overwhelm him. Slowly, he begins to breathe normally again, the haze lifting as the flicker of adrenaline fades. Battlefields created altered states not through herbs or rituals, but through the raw intensity of survival. The mind, pushed beyond its limits, responded with transformations that felt profound, frightening, or strangely empowering. These experiences shaped warriors deeply, living in their memories long after the battles ended. Chapter 16: Storytellers, Myths, and the Worlds Born in the Mind. Long before books were common, and long before stories could travel through pages or screens, tales lived inside the voices of storytellers. These men and women carried entire worlds within their memories, worlds of heroes, monsters, spirits, and distant kingdoms. In the Middle Ages, a good storyteller could transform an ordinary night into something magical, shifting the minds of every listener in the room. Imagine a chilly evening after the day's work is done. The villagers gather in a small hut or around the hearth in the tavern. The fire crackles softly, sending warm, dancing light across their faces. Children sit cross-legged near the front, eyes wide with anticipation. Adults settle onto benches or lean against the walls, letting the warmth seep into their tired limbs. Slowly, the noise settles into a hush as the storyteller begins. Their voice is low at first, steady and inviting. As they speak, the room feels smaller, more intimate, as though everyone has entered a shared dream. The storyteller's words flow gently, painting images in the minds of the listeners, images brighter and clearer than anything the faint firelight could reveal. The villagers imagined towering forests filled with spirits who guarded ancient secrets. They picture monstrous beasts lurking in caves beneath the earth, waiting for the brave or the foolish to wander too close. They see noble heroes embarking on impossible quests, guided by omens, dreams, or divine instruction. The storyteller's voice rises and falls like waves, carrying the audience deeper into the tale with each shifting rhythm. In this dimly lit room, the listeners enter a collective trance. Their breathing slows. Their thoughts drift away from the struggles of daily life, away from cold weather, weary hands, and worries about the coming season. Instead, their minds roam freely through landscapes shaped entirely by imagination. It is in these moments of shared story that people experience the gentle, natural high, an escape created without drink, herb, or prayer. The mind responded to vivid imagery, emotional arcs, and the calming cadence of a practiced voice. Listeners sometimes felt as though they had truly seen the spirits described, or heard the echoes of distant lands. Their hearts raced during moments of tension, then relaxed during scenes of safety or triumph. Imagine a storyteller describing a ghostly figure who wandered the moors at night, glowing faintly beneath the moon. Some villagers would hold their breath, listening so intently that the boundary between story and reality blurred. When the storyteller paused for effect, the silence in the room felt alive, as though the spirit itself hovered just beyond sight. After the story ended, the listeners often remained quiet for a few moments, adjusting slowly back to the familiar world around them. Their eyes blinked in the firelight. Someone let out a long breath. A child leaned closer to a parent, still half lost in the tale. The spell lifted gently, leaving behind a lingering warmth and a sense of connection. Storytelling shaped belief and memory. A tale told enough times became part of the culture, woven into the fabric of identity. Stories explained the unexplainable, comforted the grieving, warned the careless, and inspired the young. They traveled from village to village, carried by merchants, travelers, and wandering minstrels, evolving with each retelling. Some stories describe experiences that mirrored the effects of herbs or dreams, visions of glowing lights, encounters with strange beings, or sensations of floating above the earth. Listeners accepted these as possible, because their world was full of mystery, and the mind was often touched by unexplained sensations. Imagine a quiet night after a long story. The villagers step outside one by one, the cold air wrapping around them. Above, the sky stretches endlessly, dotted with stars. The children glance nervously toward the forest, half expecting to see the shapes from the story peering back. Adults laugh softly, shaking their heads, yet they too feel the echo of the tale lingering in their thoughts. In a time before written words became common, storytellers shaped entire generations. Their voice was a doorway, their story a path, and the listeners walked that path together, feeling, imagining, dreaming. Through these shared journeys, medieval people discovered a simple truth: the mind itself is capable of transporting us far beyond the world we see. Soon, we will explore the influence of sickness and fever, and the strange, vivid visions that accompanied them. Chapter 17: Illness, Fever Dreams, and the Mind's Descent into Strange Worlds. In the Middle Ages, illness was an ever-present companion. It drifted through villages silently, sometimes taking root in a single home, other times sweeping through entire communities without warning. Without modern medicine, people faced sickness with a mixture of fear, acceptance, and desperate hope. And in the midst of fever and suffering, the mind often slipped into realms that felt as real as waking life, strange landscapes shaped by pain, heat, and the body's struggle for survival. Imagine a small, dim room late at night. A sick child lies on a straw-filled bed, their skin hot to the touch, their breath shallow and quick. A candle flickers beside them, its light trembling across the walls. A parent sits nearby, exhausted and fearful, dipping a cloth into cool water and laying it gently across the child's forehead. Outside, the world continues in quiet darkness, unaware of the battle taking place within this small space. As fever rises, the child slips into a state where dreams and reality blend together. Shapes leap and twist in their vision. Colors brighten unnaturally, turning shadows into vivid forms that move even when the room is still. They might whisper to figures only they can see. Their hands might reach into the air, grasping at nothing yet believing they are touching something real. These fever dreams are powerful, consuming, and unforgettable. Adults, too, experience these episodes. A strong man who had spent years working the fields might suddenly find himself weakened by sickness, lying helpless in a bed that feels both familiar and foreign. As his fever intensifies, his mind drifts. He may see faces he has not thought of in years, parents long gone, friends from childhood, people he loved and lost. Their voices seem close, soothing, as though they are speaking from within the very air around him. At times, fever created nightmares so vivid that people awoke screaming, convinced they had been attacked by spirits or dragged into dark, unknown places. These visions clung to them even after the fever faded, leaving behind memories that felt more like lived experiences than dreams. Without understanding the science of infection or the body's reaction to heat, medieval people explained these episodes through the only language they knew, that of spirits, demons, signs, and divine intervention. Imagine a woman suffering through a harsh winter illness. She lies beneath heavy blankets, her breath rattling softly. The fever wraps around her like a suffocating cloak, pulling her mind into strange currents. In one moment, she feels herself floating above her body, weightless, drifting toward a warm, distant light. In another, she finds herself wandering through a dark forest, calling out for someone she cannot name. The boundaries of time and place fall away, leaving only sensations. Her family watches helplessly as she murmurs incoherent words or stares at the ceiling with terrified eyes. They whisper prayers, light candles, and place charms beside her bed. When she finally awakens hours later, drenched in sweat, she speaks of visions so intense they bring tears to her eyes. And though her loved ones cannot fully understand, they listen with reverence, for such stories are not uncommon. Illness shaped the medieval understanding of dreams, visions, and the unseen. People believed fevers opened a doorway between the physical world and the spiritual one. They thought sickness allowed the soul to roam, to see things hidden from the healthy mind. While fear surrounded these moments, there was also awe, a recognition that the human spirit was capable of leaving the ordinary behind, even if only briefly. Some interpreted their fever dreams as warnings or prophecies. Others saw them as punishments or tests. A few believed they had been given glimpses of the afterlife. These interpretations influenced life decisions, shaped stories, and sometimes changed the course of a person's entire belief system. Fevers were not merely physical events. They were journeys, frightening, surreal, and transformative. And though medieval people did not understand their cause, they respected their power. Soon, we will explore a more structured form of transformation, the exhilaration and awe created by medieval art, architecture, and the sacred spaces that shape the mind. Chapter 18: Cathedrals, Art, and the Transformations Inspired by Beauty. There were places in the medieval world where the mind could rise into stillness and awe without the help of drink, herbs, fear, or suffering. These were the great cathedrals, towering structures of stone and glass that reached toward the heavens like monumental prayers carved into the landscape. For countless people who lived ordinary, humble lives, stepping into such a space brought about a shift in perception so deep and profound that it felt like touching another world. Imagine approaching a cathedral at dawn. The sky is pale, washed with the cool colors of early morning. Birds circle its highest spires, their silhouettes small against the immense structure. The building rises far above the rooftops of the city, its presence both commanding and gentle. As you draw closer, details emerge, carved figures of saints, angels with outstretched wings, beasts meant to guard the sacred interior. Each stone holds a story. When you step through the heavy wooden doors, the world outside disappears behind you. A soft hush settles over your senses. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of incense and stone. Light streams through stained glass windows in brilliant colors, deep blues, warm reds, luminous golds, more vibrant than anything seen in the daily world of mud roads and smoky homes. The light seems to float, suspended in the air like a living presence. For someone who had never traveled beyond their village, who lived a life defined by simple wooden structures and dim interiors, this place would feel impossibly vast. The ceiling rises so high that it seems to dissolve into shadow. The distant echoes of footsteps create a sense of endless space. The architecture draws the gaze upward, encouraging the mind to lift along with it. Here, even silence feels full, rich with meaning, layered with centuries of whispered prayers and quiet hopes. A person standing alone in this space might feel as though the weight they carry has been gently lifted. Their breath deepens. Their heart slows. The world narrows to a single moment of peace. Imagine a traveler entering for the first time after weeks on the road. Their clothing is dusty, their body tired, yet the moment they cross the threshold, their exhaustion seems to soften. They walk slowly, overwhelmed by the colors and the light. A choir begins to sing somewhere beyond their sight, the harmony rising and falling like the movement of water. The music fills the cathedral, and with it comes a sensation that could only be described as transcendence. Even those who could not read the scriptures still understood the stories told through the paintings and sculptures. Scenes of great suffering and great hope adorned the walls. Angels, saints, heroes, and martyrs gazed down from every corner. Their expressions, carved or painted, conveyed emotions so powerful that they seemed to speak directly to the soul. In these moments of quiet contemplation, the mind entered a state that felt almost dreamlike. The cathedral, with its towering pillars and luminous windows, created an environment where ordinary thoughts drifted away. Worries and fears seemed small beneath the arches. The heart opened, the mind expanded, and people felt more connected, to faith, to beauty, to something vast and unknowable. This sense of elevation was not accidental. The builders of cathedrals understood the effect of space, light, and sound on the human spirit. They crafted these structures to inspire awe and devotion, to remind people of the divine presence they believed guided the world. In a time of hardship and uncertainty, these places offered a refuge not just for prayer, but for the mind itself. Some claimed that within these walls, they saw visions, gentle flashes of light with no earthly source, figures moving in the corner of their eye, or sudden waves of warmth that filled their chest. Whether these were spiritual experiences or simply the mind's response to overwhelming beauty, they were cherished and shared in hushed tones. Imagine sitting near the front of the cathedral as the sunlight shifts across the stained glass, painting the floor in colors that move slowly with the passing hours. You hear the soft shuffle of feet, the distant murmur of a priest, the faint rustle of robes. The world seems suspended, held tenderly in place. In these sacred spaces, medieval people found a form of exaltation, a gentle high born from wonder, reverence, and the longing for something greater than themselves. Chapter 19: Demons, Spirits, and the Creatures the Mind Believed Were Real. As much as beauty and faith could lift the medieval mind into states of awe, fear and uncertainty could just as easily pull it into darker realms. In a world without scientific explanation, shadows held secrets. Strange noises carried meaning, and the unseen forces of the night felt close enough to touch. Medieval people lived in constant conversation with the supernatural, interpreting unusual sensations and experiences as signs of spirits, demons, or creatures that moved quietly between worlds. Imagine walking alone at dusk, just outside the edge of a village. The light fades quickly, turning the sky from blue to gray, and then to a deepening purple. The wind rustles through tall grass, creating whispers that seem to shift direction with every step. A narrow path winds toward the forest, where the trees form a dark wall against the last glow of the sun. In such a moment, even the most grounded mind might feel a tremor of unease. For medieval people, this unease had meaning. They believed the world was alive with invisible presences, some benevolent, many not. A sudden chill in the air might signal a wandering spirit. An animal behaving strangely might indicate a demon nearby. A flicker of movement seen out of the corner of the eye could be a creature passing through the realm of humans just long enough to be noticed. These interpretations were not seen as dramatic or unusual. They were simply part of life. The supernatural sat beside the natural like two intertwined threads, each influencing the other. Inside the home, fear sometimes grew stronger. Smoke-filled rooms, flickering firelight, and restless sleep created the perfect conditions for the imagination to roam freely. Shadows cast by uneven flames stretched into strange shapes. A branch tapping against the wall could sound like a knock from something seeking entry. A moan from the wind slipping through a crack might be mistaken for a whisper. Imagine a man waking suddenly in the middle of the night, his breath tight in his throat. He feels a pressure on his chest and cannot move. In the dim glow of dying embers, he sees a dark figure crouched beside the bed, its features obscured, its presence suffocating. Seconds pass like an eternity before he can draw a full breath and the figure dissolves into the shadows. He lies trembling, convinced he has been visited by something not of this world. Such encounters were common. Sleep paralysis, night terrors, and hallucinations caused by exhaustion or sickness were interpreted as direct contact with supernatural beings. People did not question the reality of what they saw or felt. Their world was full of forces that operated beyond understanding. In villages, stories grew from these experiences. Tales of demons that prowled the night, spirits that lingered near crossroads, witches who transformed into animals, and creatures that mimicked the voices of loved ones to lure travelers into danger. These stories were retold again and again, their details shifting with each retelling, becoming richer, darker, and more convincing. Imagine sitting around a fire after sunset. The storyteller's voice lowers as they describe a spirit known to walk the forest edge, its footsteps soft yet unmistakable. The listeners lean closer, their faces lit by the warm glow of flames. Children press against their parents, eyes wide, afraid yet drawn to the tale. The story weaves itself into the night, mingling with the sounds of nature until the listeners feel the presence of the creature hovering just beyond the reach of the fire's light. Fear itself could create altered states. A traveler alone on a moonless night might feel as though unseen eyes watched from every direction. Their heartbeat quickened. Their breath grew shallow. Every rustle of leaves seemed significant. In this heightened state, the mind played tricks, transforming ordinary sights into threats and ordinary sounds into warnings. Yet fear did not simply torment medieval people. It shaped their worldview. It explained the unexplainable. It gave structure to uncertainty. It allowed them to turn danger into story, and story into caution. Even the most frightening creatures had a purpose: to guide behavior, to teach lessons, to help people navigate the unknown. In the dark corners of the medieval imagination, demons and spirits were not abstract ideas. They were real presences that influenced daily life, shaped decisions, and colored the world with a sense of mystery and wonder. Chapter 20: The Meaning Behind the Highs. What medieval minds were searching for. After wandering through forests, taverns, battlefields, monasteries, and shadowed corners of the night, it becomes clear that medieval people did not seek altered states simply for pleasure or escape, though sometimes that was part of it. More often, these experiences were windows into something deeper, something harder to name. They were attempts to understand the world, to soothe the heart, and to make sense of mysteries that surrounded them every day. Life in the Middle Ages was filled with hardship, uncertainty, and questions without answers. Illness came unexpectedly. Weather changed without warning. Dreams felt powerful. Death waited close at hand. In a world so uncertain, people longed for meaning, some small assurance that their experiences mattered, that their suffering had purpose, that they were not alone in the vastness of existence. Altered states of mind, whether brought on by herbs, fear, exhaustion, ritual, or emotion, provided glimpses into a world that felt larger than the one they saw. These moments softened the edges of reality, opening a space where imagination and belief could breathe more freely. In those moments, medieval people felt connected to forces beyond themselves, forces they believed shaped their lives in ways they could not fully understand. Imagine a woman who, after drinking an herbal remedy, felt herself drift into a strange dream where her late mother spoke to her. The dream was vivid, comforting, and impossible to shake from her mind. She believed the message she received was real, a guidance from someone who still watched over her. Whether the dream was born from emotion, chemistry, or longing didn't matter. What mattered was how deeply it touched her. Or imagine a warrior who survived a battle he thought would surely end his life. In the hours afterward, he felt a sensation of profound clarity and gratitude, a moment where the world seemed brighter, sharper, and full of grace. He believed he had been protected by a higher power. That belief shaped his identity, his faith, and the choices he made in the years to come. Monks, when they felt themselves lifted by prayer or by the swell of sacred music, interpreted this as a connection to the divine. They believed their minds were opening to a spiritual truth, and that what they felt was a gift. This belief strengthened their devotion and brought them peace in a life of discipline and sacrifice. Even the villagers who woke from a night terror convinced they had been visited by a creature of the dark found meaning in their fear. It warned them. It taught them. It reminded them that the world held dangers beyond the visible, and that they must tread carefully. For medieval people, everything held significance. A strange sound in the night might be more than just wind, it might be a spirit passing by. A sudden feeling of warmth during prayer might be a sign of divine favor. A dream that lingered long after waking might be a message from beyond. The mind shifts, small or dramatic, were never meaningless. In this way, the experiences we now call altered states were woven directly into medieval worldviews. They shaped personal stories, social traditions, religious beliefs, and the way people understood themselves. These moments lifted them beyond the routines of daily life, giving them glimpses of mystery and wonder in a world that often felt unforgiving. Imagine a quiet evening as a villager sits alone after a long day. They think about the strange sensation they felt earlier, a moment of dizziness, a sudden warmth, a fleeting vision. They do not dismiss it. Instead, they hold it gently, turning it over in their mind, wondering if it was a message or a sign. They fall asleep with the sense that their life is connected to something unseen and meaningful. These moments gave people a sense of belonging in the grand, mysterious tapestry of existence. They allowed them to believe that their fears, hopes, joys, and sorrows were part of a larger story. And in a world where survival required constant effort, these beliefs brought comfort, a quiet reassurance that they were not wandering alone. Chapter 21: The Echoes of Medieval Highs in the Modern World. As we near the end of this journey, it becomes clear that the altered states of medieval life were not relics of a distant, forgotten age. In quiet, subtle ways, they continue to shape the world we live in today. Though centuries have passed, the same human desires for meaning, comfort, escape, wonder, and connection still guide us. Much of what medieval people felt, imagined, or feared lives on in our stories, our rituals, and even our everyday experiences. Consider the world of fantasy, so common in books, films, and games. The creatures that fill those stories, the fairies, the forest spirits, the demons that lurk in the dark, the witches who wield mysterious power, are all descendants of medieval imagination. They were born from the same dreams, fears, and visions that shaped the minds of people who lived long before us. The glowing lights in the woods, the whispers carried on the wind, the strange shapes drifting at the edge of sleep, all of these became the foundations of legends that still enchant us today. Even the structure of modern horror owes much to the Middle Ages. The shadowy figure seen in the corner of the eye. The cold feeling of something unseen watching. The sense of being pinned to the bed by an invisible force. These sensations, explained now by science, still evoke the same ancient fear that once led villagers to whisper about dark spirits in the night. Our minds respond to these things as they always have, because the basic patterns of human imagination have not changed. Rituals, too, remain part of our world. Though they no longer resemble the charms and protective gestures of medieval life, they serve similar purposes. We light candles for remembrance. We sit in silence when we need clarity. We play music to soothe our emotions. We celebrate milestones with gatherings that transform ordinary nights into moments of connection. All of these carry echoes of medieval belief, born from the same desire to turn uncertainty into something meaningful. Even the feelings themselves, those shifts in awareness that once seemed to come from herbs, dreams, or prayer, are familiar today. A moment of awe inside a cathedral or a concert hall. A sudden rush of fear while walking alone at night. A sense of peace during meditation. A dream so vivid it lingers into morning. A deep emotional release after hardship. None of these are foreign to us. They are woven into human nature. Imagine sitting quietly as music swells around you, and for a moment, the world seems to fade. You breathe more deeply. Your mind drifts. This sensation is not unlike what a medieval monk felt during a long chant, or what a pilgrim felt upon reaching a sacred place. Though the context has changed, the human response remains the same. Or consider the way a strong emotion, grief, joy, fear, or hope, can shift your perception of the world. Colors may seem brighter or dimmer. Time may feel slower or faster. These inner transformations mirror the experiences of medieval people who found meaning in every sensation, believing that each shift carried a message or a lesson. Even the landscapes we imagine when we think of enchanted forests or haunted places come from medieval minds. They passed their stories from voice to voice, from one firelit night to the next, until these images took root so deeply that they still shape our collective imagination centuries later. Modern life may seem distant from the Middle Ages in countless ways. Yet the threads of our inner experiences, our dreams, fears, beliefs, and longings, are remarkably unchanged. Medieval people looked at the world with minds shaped by the same emotional currents that shape ours. They sought answers in places we now explain with science, but the feelings themselves remain familiar. And so the echoes linger. In every tale we tell, in every moment when our thoughts drift beyond the ordinary, in every time we pause to wonder at something beautiful or mysterious, the medieval world stirs quietly beneath the surface. Their experiences remind us that being human has always been a mixture of the seen and unseen, the known and the unknown, the real and the imagined. Soon, we will bring this journey to a close, offering a gentle reflection and a warm farewell to end our long exploration of medieval minds. Chapter 22: Closing Reflections and Farewell. And now, after walking through forests and villages, through monasteries and battlefields, through stories, dreams, and shadows, we reach the quiet end of our long journey. The medieval world, with all its mysteries and hardships, slowly fades like a distant landscape at dusk. What remains is a soft echo of everything we've explored, the comforts people sought, the fears they faced, the visions that guided them, and the small moments that helped them feel less alone. For hours, we have wandered together through lives shaped by simplicity and uncertainty, by beauty and danger, by faith and imagination. We have seen how medieval people found altered states of mind not just through herbs or drink, but through emotion, ritual, exhaustion, and belief. We have seen how their world was filled with meaning, how every shadow, dream, and sound carried significance. And we have discovered that, despite the centuries that separate us, their experiences are not so different from our own. As we settle into the final moments of this story, imagine the medieval night closing around us gently. The tavern grows quiet. The monastery candles burn low. The forest becomes still beneath the moon. The village rests peacefully, each home glowing faintly with the warmth of a dying fire. And somewhere on a distant road, a lone pilgrim lies beneath the stars, drifting into dreams shaped by the miles behind them and the hope that guided their steps. In this soft, closing light, we pause to reflect. The medieval world may seem far away, yet its echoes linger within us. The need for comfort, the desire for meaning, the longing to escape or transform, even if only for a moment. These are not ancient impulses. They are human ones. They continue to shape our thoughts and our dreams, just as they shaped the minds of those who lived centuries before us. Thank you for staying with me through this long, meandering story. Your time, your attention, and your presence through each chapter mean more than you may realize. I hope this journey has carried you gently into rest, or given your mind something soft and distant to drift through. If you enjoyed this story, and if you'd like to hear more quiet journeys like this one, you are warmly invited to support the channel. A simple like or subscription helps more than you might imagine. And if you feel like sharing, I would truly love to know where in the world you are listening from. Your messages and comments connect this story to real places, real hearts, and real moments across the world. For now, let the night take over. Allow your breathing to soften. Let the images of medieval life fade into a calm, quiet haze. Whether you are drifting towards sleep or simply resting, may peace settle over you like a gentle blanket. Thank you again for being here. Rest well and take good care.